Hello everyone, welcome to another session of the Festive Tech Calendar 2022. In this session, we are going to talk about how you can get started building mini apps for Microsoft Teams using cards for Power Apps. My name is Michel Mendes and I am a Microsoft MVP. Before we start the session, just a little bit about myself. Currently, I'm working as a senior consultant at Avanade. I am a Microsoft MVP in Microsoft 365 apps and services. I have worked in the IT field since 2008, and my background is a developer background. So I started my career as a C# developer, then I became a SharePoint developer / consultant, and currently I am working as a Microsoft 365 developer, Power Platform developer consultant. I'm from Brazil, and since 2018, I am living in Dublin, Ireland. If you want to get in touch after the session, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter in those handles at Michel Carlo on Twitter and /in/Michel Carlo on LinkedIn. So what are we going to cover today? First, we are going to explain what are the origins of cards for Power Apps. Then we are going to go through the advantages and how does it integrate with Teams, some differences with the standard Canvas app, what to expect on the upcoming releases, because this is a preview feature and there are more integration features that we can expect from it. And finally, a demo on how you can get started creating cards and a demo of a card already built with integration with Dataverse. And before we explain what are cards for Power Apps, it's important to know the main technology behind it, the origin of it. Mainly, Cards for Power Apps is based on adaptive cards, which are a platform agnostic method of sharing and interacting with information. So the good thing about it is that it doesn't require front-end development skills to build the cards, and the cards are rendered with the exact same UI in different devices. It's mainly used in applications for Microsoft Teams and Outlook, but even though it doesn't require front-end development skills to handle data on the back-end, there's always gonna be a need for a pro dev app such as a Teams bot or custom workflows built on top of Logic Apps or Power Automate to handle the data, how the card behaves, and more advanced integrations. You can get started by configuring adaptive cards on adaptivecards.io, or you can simply create it from scratch using JSON if you know the exact elements on or how to create them. But even though you can use adaptivecards.io to get started creating your adaptive cards, you will always need to do some JSON tweaking to make it work perfectly Power Automate on your apps. The other technology behind cards for Power Apps is PowerFx, which is the low-code language used in the Power Platform. It's mainly used in Canvas apps. It was introduced in Canvas apps, but now it's starting to spread across the Power Platform in other tools as well, such as Power Virtual Agents in the new preview version of it. We have some model-driven apps features that use PowerFX as well, such as the command bar customization and the new custom pages that are based on Canvas as well, and some Dataverse features that are being released, such as the new calculated columns. It's very similar to Excel expressions, and with few lines of code, you can do complex operations that would require a lot of code lines if you would be using a pro code development language. So then, as we explained what is PowerFX and what is adaptive cards, then comes cards for Power Apps, which is a new tool under the Power Platform that combines adaptive cards and PowerFX, and at the same time makes available for us a designer to build cards similar to the Canvas Apps Studio. The controls that we can use in cards for Power Apps, they are similar to what we have in the adaptive cards. We can add behaviors to the cards only using PowerFX, so we don't need to be creating external workflows or pro-code tools to handle advanced behaviors or connect to data. And one common thing that we see in cards for Power Apps as well is that you can have multiple screens instead of a card app, and then you can navigate between the screens inside of the card, the same way as you would do with a Canvas app. As Cards for Power Apps is an independent engine, basically we don't need to control its behavior using any other tool. So we can build a card, add logic on it, and simply copy a link and send it to a Teams chat, and it auto renders, and the card controls the data and how it's going to display information by itself without the need of a separate app or a separate workflow. That's a really good advantage because, for example, if you opted to develop a pro code bot to control how the adaptive cards are rendered, you would need to be maintaining a separate Azure application instance, control how it's going to be hosted and all of that. But when you use cards for Power Apps, it's automatically hosted in the Power Platform. At the moment, it integrates only with Dataverse, but more connectors are going to be released. That's already stated by Microsoft on the official blog posts. You don't need to be doing JSON tweaking to create the cards. You can only use the designer, but if needed, you also can edit the JSON in the new editor if you want. And even though we have a studio similar to Canvas apps and we have the same PowerFX language, there are some differences that are important to highlight. One of them is that the usage of some functions vary a little bit. So for example, at the moment, if you want to filter data or do lookup in data from Dataverse, you would need to use the logical names instead of display names for tables and columns. Also, not all functions, not all PowerFX functions are available for cards. Also, the purpose of cards, you would be focusing on building cards with small pieces of functionality instead of building full apps or web pages as you would be doing with Canvas apps. The variable concepts, they are a little bit different. So we don't have context variables, the ones we use to update with update context in a Canvas app. We have only the global variables that we use to update with set. And those variables, before we use them, we have to explicitly configure them in the app. And we have another new option, a new variable option in cards, which is the concept of variable persistence. So a variable can be temporary or persistent. If a variable is temporary, its value is going to be lost between card sessions. But if a variable is persistent, its value is going to be kept across card sessions, even within different users. So imagine that you would be storing that value somewhere that cards handles. You cannot update media files or images directly to the app. So for example, if you want to use an image inside of your card, you need to link to external medias. For example, a public hosted image such as an Azure blob. We don't have galleries and tables available in cards. If you want to display a list of information, you only have available some controls called fact set and column set. At the moment, those are the only ones working. You can reference controls directly to extract its values. So for example, in a Canvas app, if you wanted to access the value of a text field, you would be needing to access the control name.text to access the value. But in cards, you simply have to pass the name of the control and it handles the value. It knows what is the value of the control regardless of what control it is. As I stated in the previous slide, PowerFX support vary a little bit, and there are some non-limitations already stated by Microsoft. Mainly the functions that are highlighted by Microsoft, they refer to device functions or functions related to forms, which makes sense not to be available in cards because we don't have those controls in cards. But also there's a little bit of difference in the way you update data from cards. We cannot use the patch function to create a new record at the moment. So for example, if you want to add a new Dataverse record, we would need to use the collect function instead of the patch function, passing the default value with the new object that you wanted to add into Dataverse. There are some other functions not available that's not stated in the documentation yet. One is the notify function that we use to send notification banners into the apps. And the main one is the user function that we use to detect what's the current user of a Canvas app. That function doesn't exist, it's not supported in cards, but we can use a new object called viewer, which works a little bit differently, but we can detect which is the current user by using it. One thing that you will note if you start creating cards in a new environment and send a card to a user who has not been properly configured in the environment is that the card is going to fail to load. That's because the user needs to have some special privileges to render cards. Those two new roles, they are out-of-the-box roles created by the Power Platform. The first one is called cards role, and this role gives full control in any row in the cards table, which is used to store the cards. By consequence, a user having this role is able to create and edit cards. And the second one is cards basic role, which gives only read access, read permissions in the cards table. So a user with this role is able only to use the cards, but not create cards. So basically, if a user needs to access cards from an environment where he doesn't have high privileges, you have to assign one of those cards role to the user, plus whatever permissions, whatever extra permissions needed in Dataverse if the user needs to access Dataverse data. What we can expect in upcoming releases. At the moment, this is a very early preview, so don't consider it for production scenarios by now. Microsoft already announced that we are going to have new features coming in the near future, such as availability in Outlook, support for more Power Platform connectors, and it's not announced, but if we play around cards, we can see from the variables configurations that we can find the options of input or and output variables and send values to a bot or flow. So basically, from that, we can imagine that there's going to be some integration with Power Virtual Agents and Power Automate as well. Now that we know what the cards are, let's jump into a quick demo. If you had to make.powerapps.com and try to find the option to create cards across the options that you use to create Canvas apps or any other type of Power App, you won't see it. But if you head into the left-hand side of the home menu, you can find the option Cards Preview and the Create option. To create a card, you simply click Create a Card after you navigate into the Create option. Give it a name. And give it a description. To start creating cards, you can drag and drop controls from the left-hand side into the card as you would do with a Canvas app, or you simply select one element and click on the element on the left-hand side, and it's going to be added into the card. In this case, we are going to add 4 buttons, which we will use to update some variables just to demo the concept. So we rename all the buttons. We relabel all the buttons first. Now that we have the buttons with the correct labels, if we try to set a variable value as we would do in a Canvas app, you can see that it's going to give us an error message. So for example, we will use var counter just to increase its value. It detects that a variable doesn't exist. As I mentioned before in the slides, we need to come to the variable menu and configure it. When we configure a variable, we can choose what's the type of the variable. give it a default value and give it a name. First one, we are going to set them as permanent. So what happens is the value of the variable shouldn't be reset across sessions. We can see that it's already highlighted in green, so the variable is detected. We copy this formula for countdown and simply change to -1 instead of +1. And we can, from here, also create a new variable to be a temporary one. And on the temp count up button, we add the option to update the var temp counter instead of the var counter. Let's edit this just to show the variables values. So this is going to be counter. So we're going to display the value of the counter variable. The second one, we are going to display the temporary variable, just to show how it behaves in terms of variables resetting or keeping values. Let's just make the text not bold so that we have both labels in the same way. And to play the card, it's similar to a Canvas app. So you click play, it will save and play the card. It asks to save and play, but it's going to open in a new tab. So simply, the behavior is very basic. We simply created buttons to increase or decrease values of the counter variables. So let's say for the count up var, we can keep clicking and then decrease values if needed. For the temporary one, works the same, okay? But if we share the card with someone, we can see that only the permanent variable value is kept. To share a card, you can simply click send. It already shows you the link to the card and tells you that the card is already copied. Then, as the card is already copied, you can simply open a Teams chat, be it a channel chat or an individual chat or a group chat. So in this case, let's paste it into a channel chat. If we simply paste our card, you can see it renders automatically. It kept our persistent variable value, and we can again play around counting up and down. Let's increase it a little bit. So we have as a value for the persistent counter 5. So if I send the same card in a private chat, it will keep the persistent variable value. As we can see, the counter value is 5, the persistent variable. So that's an example of how you can get started adding controls and manipulating variables into the card. So I wanted also to show you a solution that I have pre-built here that is based on Dataverse. So we have a basic table with no extra columns. We are only using the name column of the table just to store a line of text on it. So for example, if you are doing the Secret Santa in your team and you didn't want to give repeated gifts for the person or something that the person was not wishing to receive, you could have a gift suggestions list where you can see some suggestions of gifts from your team members. And because of that, you know what the person wants to expect. Obviously, this could be done by creating a model-driven app and then adding forms so that people can submit data. But it's nice to show how it would integrate with Microsoft Teams by using cards. So in this instance, we have here a gift suggestions submission card that we can use to send gift suggestions to this Dataverse table. So in the same way as we sent the counter card, we can copy the link to this card, send it into a channel conversation. From the card, we have two buttons, one that navigates into the screen that we use to add the gift suggestion, and the second one that we can use to open all gift suggestions. And then that's going to open a model-driven app created with a list of gift suggestions from our colleagues. So let's just submit a gift, navigating into the submit a gift suggestion, navigating into the add gift suggestion list. Let's add our gift. This button navigates us to a thank you page. And if we head over to the model-driven app we just showed, we can see that the iPad mini is already added into the app. How was this card built? Same idea as the other one, but we added a few extra features. So for example, a button to view all gift suggestions is simply, instead of calling a PowerFx formula, we used the option to open URL. The button to add a gift suggestion is used to navigate to an extra screen we have here named Add Gift. And if we head over to the tree view as we have in a Canvas app, we see that there is this Add Gift screen where we use then a button to add the gift suggestion. This button uses the collect formula to save data into our gift suggestions table, getting data from the text field. And as I explained previously, we don't need to put the text field.text. You simply pass the name of the text field, and then it navigates into the confirmation screen so the person knows that it was successful and saved. To be able to access data from Dataverse, it works the same way as we would be doing with the Canvas app. We have to add the tables in the data pane. The UI is a little bit different, but basically when you click Add Data, you find the connector for Dataverse, and then you would be searching for the table you want to use. Before, you have to select the connection you want to use in the app, and you can find the table that you want to use across all the Dataverse tables. So that's it for the session. I hope you found the information useful, and I also hope you have a nice Christmas. Thank you.